So we're going to look at the relationship between mentoring and learning. Next slide, please, Fisher.
今天呢，我们也主要了解导师辅导跟学习之间的关系。
People don't always immediately recognize the connection between coaching and mentoring and the learning process. But if you define learning as I have, you will see that learning is a process which moves a person from a point where they don't know something, they can't understand it, they can't do it, or they don't believe it. And through learning, they get to a point where they do know, they do understand, they can do, and they do believe. Thanks.
大家在平时的就是实践过程当中，可能不会马上能够意识到导师教练与学习之间的关系，但一旦你发现就是了解到学习的过程，你会有更深刻的认识。那学习过程呢，它是帮助大家从你不知道、不理解、就不能做或者不相信某些事情的时候，然后通过学习让你开始知道、开始了解、开始能做、开始相信某些事情的时候。
So if we look at that and accept that as a definition of learning, we can see that mentoring, among many things, is a learning intervention. It has to be, because it's about changing a person from a position of negativity to a position of positivity, from a position of I can't or I don't know to a position of I can or I do know.
然后大家一旦掌握这个定义以后呢，就是可以发现，就是导师辅导它其实也是一个学习干预的过程。它在这个过程里，它帮助比如说学员，然后帮助这个人从他消极的状态，就被动的状态，然后转化到积极主动的状态，就从他之前不能做某些事情，不知道某些事情，然后变成他开始知道某些事情，然后他开始能做，相信某些事情。
So in all the workplace coaching and mentoring programs that I'm involved with, I always introduce my coaches and mentors to some fundamentals about the learning process, and in particular, the learning process for adults in the workplace.
在我在做就是职场中做导师辅导过程当中呢，我都会就是向我的学员介绍关于学习，就是把学习的基本内容融入到这个导师辅导过程当中。然后这个学习过程呢，更多的主要是关于成人的学习过程。
And this brings us to the next slide, please, Fisher. Some work of Malcolm Knowles, who was an expert in adults in the workplace and their learning needs, what adults in the workplace need in order to be able to learn effectively. Thanks, IC.
然后这里呢，我们主要引入了诺尔斯的成人学习理论，然后他呢就是介绍了就在工作场所中的成人，他们需要学习什么，然后才能够达到高效学习的目标。
And again, these points that Knowles mentions are absolutely entirely relevant to the work we do in the workplace, coaching and mentoring others. We can see that we need to work with people who are motivated, who want to learn and know what they want to learn. Thank you, IC.
然后在这个里面的这个几点呢，他们也是与我们在就职场里面做导师辅导或者教练其实是紧密相关的。因为在职场里面，就是作为成人，他其实是需要有内在动力的，他要有学习的需求，然后他想学习，然后也能够去主动的学习。
And we also, particularly in the workplace, we need to remember that the adults whom we are coaching or mentoring already have a lot of life experience and knowledge, which they must be encouraged to bring to the mentoring process.
然后呢，我们也要记住一点，就是当我们在就是面向成人的他们的学员的时候，他们是已经具备了一定的生活经验和知识的。然后这样的经验和知识呢，是可以我们鼓励他们带入到这样的学习和导师教练辅导过程中的。
And as we remember at the last webinar, I was privileged to share with you, adults, particularly in the workplace, and if they're being supported by mentors or coaches, they need to have goals. It's very important to be goal-oriented, to be working towards the achievement of a goal.
在上次我做讲座的时候呢，也跟大家谈到，就是在成人他需要导师或者教练的时候呢，他是需要有明确的目标的，这一点非常重要，就是他一定是目标导向的。
And of course, the learning, therefore the mentoring and coaching they receive and they have with you must be relevant. It must be appropriate, and it must help them work towards the achievement of their goals.
那同时呢，他这个学习，它必须是就是与它相关的，是有帮助的，是能够就是有实用性的，能够帮助他能够实现他的目标的。
They like things to be practical. They like to be able to implement new ideas, new thoughts, new pieces of information that arise from the mentoring.
那成人呢，他也是一定希望就是学习内容是有实用性的，就是那些接触到的新的想法、新的知识、新的信息都能够为他们所用的。
And finally, Noel says that adult learners like to be respected. And in my opinion, in the mentoring relationship, that means as much as possible, we should try to make our relationship a relationship of equals, in which we both are learners and we both stand to gain from that relationship. It's not a superior inferior relationship.
最后一点呢是成人学习者我们都希望受到尊敬。然后在导师辅导关系当中呢，就是我们要尽量的把就是导师跟学员之间的关系是建立在平等的基础上的。然后双方呢都是学习者，然后都能从这个关系当中有所收获。
Thank you, I see. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Fisher. There are lots and lots of theories of learning, but because we're looking at learning in the workplace, I use two models of experiential learning. That is, learning from experience.
关于学习有很多的理论，然后我主要引用了2个模型。第一个是关于是体验式学习，就是从经验中学习。
And the first of these is, and you might be familiar with, David Kolb's experiential learning cycle, which has been around for a very long time now, since the 80s, I think. And he defined experiential learning as 4 stages, which we see on the slide.
然后这个库伯的学习圈理论呢，就是相信大家已经是很熟悉了，大概可能在上世纪80年代的时候，他设计了这个模型，然后他把这个学习圈呢分为4个步骤。
Now, Kolb numbered these 4 phases as having an activity, an experience, either having an experience, being proactive, or being reactive. Something happens to you. That's the first thing on his cycle.
然后首先呢第一个是关于活动，就是首先是拥有经验，然后这个拥有经验呢有2方面，一个是你主动的去创造经验，还有一个是当经验来临的时候，你可能被动的去接受吸收。
The second stage with Kolb is reflecting on that experience. Oh, what was all that about? Why did that happen? What made me do that? Etc., etc. It is thinking about reflecting back on the experience you've had.
第二个呢是对经验的反思，然后你会想，这主要是关于什么，然后发生了什么，然后我要怎么做，主要是对你之前所拥有经验的一个回顾。
The third stage on Kolb's cycle is drawing conclusions or learning about the experience, reflecting on the reasons, and then having what we sometimes call the aha moment. That's why that happened.
然后第三个呢，就是对经验进行总结，然后从中学习，就是你会想到是什么原因引起了这个，这也是我们的可能就是突然就醒悟的时刻，原来是这个原因。
So if it's been a negative experience, and we all have those negative experiences, by stopping and thinking about the reasons for that negative experience, maybe we have been trying out a new recipe in the kitchen. We've been wanting to make some new dish, and we don't get it right. By reflecting on the reasons why we make a mistake, we can then conclude what caused the mistakes and move on. Okay, I see.
然后这个呢，就是比如说，当你可能是经历了一些可能是一些比较消极的经验吧，比如说举个例子，你想做一道新菜，然后你得到了一个就是新的菜谱，然后你去尝试，但是并没有做成功，也就是你等于是试错了，然后这个时候呢，你是开始从中就是总结经验，然后通过在这个总结基础上，然后再去尝试。
So in my example about making a mistake in a new recipe, I might have realized by reflecting and then thinking through the experience, oh, I forgot to put the eggs in. So then I will plan for when I will make the same recipe again, but I will correct my mistakes and make certain I get all the ingredients correct. Okay?
然后就继续还是这个例子，就当我意识到我可能就是犯了一个错误的时候呢，我就会去思考，然后在这思考过程当中呢，然后我可能会想通了，我刚才可能原来我刚刚忘了放进鸡蛋了，然后下一次我再试的时候呢，我就是依然是一样的配方，但是我这个时候呢，就是把所有的成分都放正确了。
And this is where mentoring in the workplace can be so helpful, because sometimes people at work just go from activity to activity to activity, and they never get any better. They never improve because they don't use the whole of Kolb's learning, experiential learning cycle.
我们在职场做就是导师辅导或教练指导的时候呢，用这个学习理论是非常有用的，因为其实在职场中有很多人他可能就是一直的在做事情，不断的做事情，但是然后缺少了这个反思的过程，就是没有遵循有这样的学习圈。
Okay, so next slide, please, Fisher. So after Kolb, two British industrial psychologists, Peter Honey and Alan Mumford, developed Kolb's model and changed it in two particular ways.
然后呢，是有两位英国的心理学家，他把这个模型呢，然后也进行了一个，就是也是应用了它，然后从此就是得出了一个新的理论模型。
The first way they changed it was to say, and this was all based on extensive empirical research. I think they did research with about 30,000 managers throughout a range of industries in the United Kingdom, United States, and parts of Western Europe. And that's important.
他们的这个理论呢，也是经过了大量实证研究得出来的，然后大概是通过研究了大概有3万名，就是西方国家的可能各个行业的管理者们，然后得出的这个理论。
The first change they made was that we don't, although the cycle remains the same, we don't all enter the cycle at stage 1, having an activity. But we can enter the cycle at any one of those 4 stages, which means that is where we have a preference to learn.
然后就是发现呢，就是大家并不是每个人都是从这个第一个活动开始展开这个学习的，也就是可能每个人因为有不同的学习倾向，所以他可能是从4个阶段里的任意一个阶段开始的他的这个学习过程的。
And that means that although we should use all 4 stages, we might have a tendency to stick or to prefer one style above other styles.
所以我们可能就是这4个阶段都会运用到，但是我们可能在就是其中一个阶段，你对它的倾向偏好可能要优于其他的阶段。
Yeah. And to make it easier for everyone to learn what these 4 preferences were, they gave them names. So the individual who likes to do things, who will jump in with enthusiasm and want to get going, he's or she's called an activist.
然后他们呢，给这4种就是不同的学习风格倾向呢，给了他们就是4个命名。然后第一种人呢，就是活动者，然后这种人他们就特别喜欢行动，然后就是非常的热情，他们愿意去积极的尝试。
The next style is the reflector. This is the person who likes to think about things before doing anything.
第二种的这种人是叫反思者，然后这种人在行动之前呢，他们会先做一个思考。
The next style, the theorist, is the person who likes to look at concepts and models and is happy with ambiguity, and it doesn't worry them at all.
第3种呢是这种人是理论者，理论者的人更多的注重概念和模型类的东西，然后即便是就是这个东西它可能是比较模糊的话，他们也是不介意的。
And the last style, the pragmatist, is the practical person, the person who will take in some information or some new learning, but is always wanting to discover how relevant and practical it will be in their workplace.
第4种呢，就是实用主义者。这种人呢，他们会想他们的就是接收到的信息以及他们学到的东西，然后在他们的工作中是否实用，是否相关。
So we can say, thanks, Fisher. Next slide. We can say that the activist is enthusiastic, happy to try out new things, doesn't always think and plan ahead, and will sometimes be disorganized and doing too much at once, but gives energy and enthusiasm to the working environment.
第一种人就是活动者，这种人他们在工作中是充满热情的，他们就是精力充沛，非常有能量，然后也非常的愿意去尝试新事物。但这种类型的人呢，他们往往就是比较欠缺去思考，然后不怎么做规划，所以他们做事情呢，就是可能一次性做很多，然后可能缺少一定的组织性。
And they're lovely people to have around, but when you're mentoring or coaching them, you sometimes need to help them develop a more to think more before they actually jump in and start to solve the problems. Thanks, Fisher.
如果当你的学员是活动者风格的这种人呢，你们就是在做导师教练的时候呢，可能就需要帮助他们，就是让他们在行动之前能够先思考。
Yeah. And then we have the reflector. Now, this is the person who will observe what's going on, will not say a lot, but is thinking all the time about what is happening.
就反思者这一类人呢，他们会就对周围发生的事情他们会去观察，然后在可能有行动之前，他们会去一直花时间在思考。
You always know that your learner is a reflector when they give you clues by some of their language.
然后你在就是面对你们的学员的时候呢，你们也可以通过他们的语言，然后能判定他们是这个类型的人。
They will say things like, "Oh, I might do that," or "That could be interesting," or "Yes, I could learn more about that." They use what we call the conditional tense in their language very frequently.
然后他们可能会说，我也许会怎么做，我可能会就是对这个感兴趣，然后我可能会学到更多。就是你看他们的语态里，可能就是更多的就是语态里会出现一些条件性的这种词汇。
And the challenge for the coach mentor in the workplace is to encourage the reflector to actually move on and make some decisions.
在你做导师教练的时候呢，你需要做的主要是去鼓励你的学员，如果他是反思者的话，要鼓励他就是尽快的能行动去做决定。
Thank you, Fisher. Next one. And then we move on to the theorist. The theorist is the most intellectually able learning preference.
理论者呢，这种人他是就非常的理智，然后也是智力方面也是比较就是有就是拓展性思维的人。
The theorist is very comfortable with ambiguity, uncertainty, and dealing with things that require a lot of research.
理论者呢，他们会比较就是对于事物，他们会可能倾向于做很多的研究，然后他们就是对这些东西内容可能充满了不确定性啊，或者是比较模糊啊，对他们来说也是 OK 的。
And again, the challenge for the workplace coach mentor is helping the theorist to actually decide that they have enough information in order to make a decision and move on.
然后如果你的学员是这种人的话，那你呢主要是帮助他，然后让他知道他其实已经掌握了就是足够的信息，可以做决定，可以行动了。
They can be over-influenced by data and not actually make the move from moving from data through information to knowledge and insight.
然后这类人呢，他们就非常的就是可能比较沉迷于就是数据，然后信息知识一类的内容。
And then the last style, thank you, Fisher, is the pragmatist. The pragmatist is practical, and for her or him, the importance of the learning is how they can make it work for them in the workplace.
最后一类呢是实用主义者，这类人就是比较的务实，就他们很在意就是你能不能把就是学到的这些内容，然后运用到工作中，就是在工作中是否行得通。
And so for the challenge again for the mentor is to help to make certain that they have thought about everything before they implement a decision.
然后作为导师呢，你在面对这类学员的时候呢，你就要让他们能够就是相信他们已经就是掌握了，就是做了足够的，已经做好了充分的准备，可以去实施，可以行动了。
Okay, so let's now have a look at the learning style preference exercise. I've produced a short. We're not ready for that slide yet. We're going to have a little exercise first, Fisher. That's right. Does everybody have the handout? What's your learning style?
I haven't shared this handout to them.
Did you send it to people?
No, I haven't sent them because I thought we would use it in this webinar.
That's
okay. We can share it now.
That's okay. Are you able to do that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
while you're doing, and I see while you're doing that, just to say that it is important for us to understand that Honey and Mumford is not a psychometric, hardwired self-assessment. It's not psychometric.
好，这个呢，就是建他给我们分享了一个练习，这个练习是，Fisher 可以分享一下吗？就是那个有个2个 word 里面有一个。
Yeah, it's if some of you might be familiar with the Myers-Briggs inventory, which is psychometric, which is about hardwiring. This is not.
这个练习呢，它主要并不是跟这个心理测量相关的。
And Honey and Mumford are at pains to say that we can adapt our learning styles. We, depending on the context, the type of learning that's being required, and the kind of learning we've had in the past, they will all influence our preferred learning style.
关于这个学习风格呢，就是我们在学习的语境，以及包括学习的类型，以及我们过去就是比较偏向的学习风格，他们都会就是影响到决定我们的学习风格偏好。
And therefore, it's important for us to know about the learning style, our own learning style preference, and the learning style preference of our learners, because that helps us to construct really helpful mentoring sessions. Now,
作为导师呢，首先我们自己要明确自己的学习风格偏好，然后也要知道学员风格，他的学习风格偏好，这样呢，就是对我们的导师辅导呢也是比较有帮助的。
Honey and Mumford's learning styles is now published by an international publisher called Pearson. I don't know that it is available in Chinese, but I am in the process of trying to find out.
这个就是哈尼芒福德他们的这个叫学习风格，就是问卷调查，学习风格问卷工具，就是 LSQ 这样的工具，他们是有一个就 Pearson 是一个国际的出版社出版的，然后现在在中国的话，就是我目前就是没有找到中文版的。
So in order for you to just have a little fun exercise with Honey and Mumford, I've devised this quick quiz.
然后也是就是为了让大家了解这个哈尼与芒福德他们这个学习风格问卷工具，然后我呢就是做了一个简易版的，就给大家就是初步了解一下。
So there are 10 situations, and what I would like you to do is to read through each and decide whether you would do A, B, C, or D in the situation that is described.
这里面呢有10个情境，然后呢大家就针对每一种情境，然后选择你的就是这个 行为这个偏好，然后 ABCD 选一个你自己比较偏向的答案。
So can everybody see all the whole of the 10 little case studies?
大家就是能看到这个。
Are you all able to do that? Can you put hands up or tell Icy or Fisher that you can do it? You can see it.
Yeah. Actually, I have already sent this to the chat box. 所以我已经把这个文件发到聊天框去，大家可以打开的。OK。
Yeah.
后来大家能看到我屏幕啊，看到屏幕上作答也可以的啊。Or you can just look at my screen, okay?
Yeah. And then decide whether you would choose A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You finish. Just to say that the full 40 statement questionnaire, the full Honey and Mumford, is, I think I sent it to Icy. At the moment, I haven't been able to find out if it is available in Chinese, but I am doing some research on that because Fisher and Icy, it might be a very useful tool for you to have if today's participants find it of interest. And I would never, ever do any coach mentoring training without helping people to understand how important a tool it is to understand and respond to learning styles.
这个就是哈尼芒福德这个就是原版的有总共有40个问题。好，这个问件呢，就是我是在我平时的就是导师教练时间当中，我是一直在用的，也让我的学员就知道它这个是非常重要的。
And later on in this webinar, I will show you a tool that I use, a visual tool that will help strengthen my argument that it is to know one's learning style preferences, both our own and those of our learner, is one of the most useful tools you can have.
这个呢，我也会就是能够向大家就是论证强化，就是这个工具就是对我们就是作为我们导师自己以及包括我们的学员，然后对于我们双方而言都是非常重要、非常有效的。
Okay, if everyone's finished, can we now go to the answer sheet, please, Icy, the key to your learning styles?
然后现在呢，就是还有另外一个是就是另外一张图，就是刚刚大家针对大家得出的答案，然后现在呢，然后做一个计算嘛。
So you will see the 10 scenarios, the 10 examples or situations, and across you'll see you'll see the letter in a specific order. If you circle your response, so for example, say for situation 1, you circle D, you put a D where it says Pragmatist. So, and then you work your way down. And then when you've finished all 10, you add up the number that number of letters you've circled for each of the 4 styles.
然后就是刚刚大家10个问题，每个问题都做出了一个 ABCD 都做出了一个选项，然后在这个每一个栏里呢，大家可以把自己这个首先可以自己选或者打勾怎么样，然后在每一栏就是把你的合计一下你最后的答案。
Everyone understand? And then
大家就是理解怎么操作了吗？
And when you're finished, I will share with you some very incomplete information I got looking at cultural differences in the use of this tool, and see what you think.
然后呢，我也会跟大家就是分享一下，可能在就是用这个工具的时候，可能出现的一些文化差异。
Okay, how's it going? Can you let me know when you've completed? How are you going, Craig? Are you done?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
有人愿意分享一下你的那个得分结果吗？
So I'm just having a look at some of these results. So Sunshine is 2, 2, 5, and 1. Interesting, Sunshine. I'm hoping to come to your session at the conference, by the way. Michelle Zhang is 2, 4, 3, and 1. That's interesting. Interesting in your mentoring relationship, Michelle, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Wendy to Reflector to, oh, that's quite balanced. Oh, Wendy, you're a person after my own heart. Very practical. You give something a go, but you do think about it and you want to get to the reasons. Here we've got 2, 4, 3. That's quite balanced as well, except Pragmatist is quite low and Reflector is quite high.
这里呢，大家都有一些答案，然后大家看自己的分数，就发现自己就是在某一方面有倾向的。有的人可能在实用这一块就分数比较高，有的人是偏向理论型的。然后后面呢，就是会给大家分享一下，就是为什么，就是这些偏向背后的原理。
So, my friends, this is just a very short exercise to show how we do have different learning style preferences. Those examples are just examples of things that happen in everyday life, and we respond differently because we are wired differently.
这个简短的练习呢，它也会让我们发现，就是我们每个人的学习风格的偏好是不一样的。所以我们在日常生活中可能也遇到这样的事情，然后我们每个人的就是反应应对的方式也是不一样的。
And your choices in that little exercise will have been influenced by the context of the example given, your own past experience, your own formal experience of learning, and possibly some cultural influences as well.
然后你们的选择呢，它其实是受一些因素影响的。比如首先情境呢，举一些例子，就包括你自己过去的一些经历经验，以及包括你可能接受过的一些比较正式的学习经验，比如说可能讲座会议这些。然后还有一种就是可能关于到是受到文化的影响。
When I was preparing this webinar, I was very conscious of the fact that Honey and Mumford were 2 British industrial psychologists. All their original research, their empirical research, was carried out in, let's say, Western culture. And I asked myself the question, I wonder how relevant their tool is for Asian culture.
在我准备这个讲座的时候呢，我当时也在想，就是这个哈尼·芒福德他们是英国人，然后他们做的大量的实证研究呢，也是以西方国家就是为这个研究那个样本的。然后我呢也问自己，这种就是它的是否就是在亚洲国家是否也有一定的相关性。
The only research that I could find concerned a study at the University of Plymouth in its sports science department.
然后我想到的一个相关的研究也是在就是某所大学它的关于运动科学方面的研究。
In which the Chinese students who were tested tended to have a majority choice for the pragmatist style.
然后这个研究呢，他发现就是中国的学生，他们大多数呢是主要偏向于实用主义的这一风格的。
But that was not the workplace. It was in a university, and there were probably other factors that don't make that data very reliable.
然后这个呢，主要是针对于学校里面的学生的，它不是针对于就是职场里面的人的，它可能也有其他的影响因素。
I hope you found that exercise interesting, and certainly if you want to take it further, IC already has the full questionnaire, the LSQ, and you can explore it further. I've just seen a comment from Michelle Yan that some of the answers you would do either or. That's perfectly normal. That's absolutely natural. So you can tick both if you want to. It's not, it's not going to invalidate your response. It would just change your learning style preference slightly, but I can't remember. Did you put your full one up, Michelle? I can't remember. So you can, it's not like a medical test. It's just there's an English phrase, quick and dirty. It's just a quick intro to this whole, to the whole of the learning styles, and the real value will come in the next example that I'm going to show you, transferring it to the coach mentoring relationship. Okay.
大家如果对这个类型感兴趣的话，我到时候会给大家分享一下，就是那个全版的那个它的那个 LSQ 这个工具。然后这个工具因为里面就是问题就设计的比较少，然后只是快速的给大家快速的这个介绍一下。然后接下来呢会向大家介绍，然后这个工具在导师辅导的过程当中它的真正的价值在哪里。
Okay, so are we all ready to move on? Is everyone happy that we can now move on to the next thing?
我们现在就是可以
The answer is not only one.
进到下一个阶段。
That's exactly right, Kelly. You can go back to the slides. Thank you. Okay. So let's just come back to this is my thoughts on why it is a very, very useful tool in our coach mentoring portfolio to understand learning styles.
接下来呢就是我们为什么要提这个学习风格呢？因为我个人的想法是，这个学习风格这个工具，它对于我们做导师教练是非常实用、非常有用的。
It helps us to prepare for our sessions. We will know what our own learning styles are, our own learning style preferences are, and how they help or hinder the mentoring process, and the learning style preference of our learner, and how those preferences again help or hinder the process.
第一个呢，首先是它能够帮助我们做好准备工作，就是我们首先是了解一下自己的学习风格偏好，然后知道自己的这些偏好，它会在导师辅导过程当中，它会起到的怎样的就是帮助作用，或者说可能有一定的阻碍作用。同时也是了解就是学员的他的那个学习风格偏好，也是了解就是学员的这个偏好，他对于我们的导师辅导过程，它有什么样的帮助和什么样的阻碍。
And we all know that along with being active listeners, the ability to ask insightful questions is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in our mentoring.
就是除了积极的聆听以外，我们知道那个提问，就是有见解的提问呢，也是在导师辅导过程中是非常有力的工具。
So by understanding learning style preferences, both our own and those of our learner, we can model our questions to be more insightful.
所以在知道了我们自己跟学员两者的学习风格偏好以后呢，我们可以就是我们更好的就是运用我们的模型，然后提出更有见解、更有针对性的问题。
And being able to implement our own learning style preference and those of our learner, we can ensure that each mentoring conversation will come to a conclusion.
然后也是通过是了解两者间的学习风格偏好呢，我们也能够确保我们对话的顺利完成。
Next slide, please, Fisher. Okay. This is a model of a tool that I developed some years ago. It's called Dialogi.
这个是我自己就是几年前设计的一个模型，叫 Dialogi.
And I developed it and designed it in order to show people who came into a coach mentoring role from a totally out with any past experience. They'd had no experience and they didn't really understand what it was about.
我设计这个模型呢，也是就是帮助那些做导师或者教练的人呢，也是知道就是经验的重要性，就是我们每个人自己都有过去的经验。
So I envisaged what a mentoring conversation in the workplace looks like, and I came up with this.
然后我当时呢也设想了一些在工作场所可能出现的对话。
So the gray bit is the workplace. That's where the work is happening, where your mentee, where your learner is at work.
这个呢主要是针对职场中的，因为我们的这个面对的学员这个时候也是就是工作场所中的人。
The red bit is where you start your conversation, and you start a conversation. How are things going? What do you want to talk about today? Those kind of questions. That's the red bit. Getting the conversation started. Okay.
然后在这个红色的这一区块呢，就是我们开始对话的一个部分。然后因为在对话当中，我们可能会说，你这事情就是进行的怎么样了？然后你今天想讨论什么样的话题呀？然后你会对此就是向他展开一系列的提问。
The orange slice is exploring, looking at the learner's issues up close, looking at it in more detail.
然后在橙色部分呢，就是你开始就通过他的经验，然后开始挖掘他的更多的相关信息。
The yellow bit is the bit where we capture the learning, where the learner says, well, that's the most important thing I've learned. Or now I know that this is important, or now I know, what I need to do. It's the capturing of the important learning in the conversation.
黄色部分呢，就是你开始抓取就是重要的学习信息。就这个学员他说他就学到的对他而言最重要的东西，然后对他而言他需要什么东西，主要是这份是抓取信息相关的内容。学习相关的方面。
The blue is exploring options. What am I going to do next? What are my next steps? Moving forward.
蓝色部分呢，就是开始思考探索下一步的行动。
And as we all know, every legitimate coach mentoring conversation must end with the learner making a decision about some action they're going to take. It can be a completely new action, or it can be trying out something in a different way because it hasn't been working to that point.
我们在做导师或教练的时候呢，我们大家都知道最后一步一定是让学员他开始做决定，他决定下一步是怎么走。这个可能是他可能采取一些新的行动，或者是说针对以往的方式，然后换一种方式，然后做这事情。
The pointer, as you can see on my little model here, moves backwards and forwards. So it looks like a real conversation, because we all know that in conversations, in your mentoring, things go backwards and forwards, don't they? You start with something, move forward. Oh, let's look at that again. Is there another way of doing it? Etc. Etc.
然后大家就是在平常对话的时候呢，也是然后就先针对一些比如说过去的一些经历，然后开始，然后呢开始，然后讲做一些比较新的不一样的体验。
So understanding our learners' learning style preference helps us to manage the conversation.
然后在我们了解学员的他的学习风格偏好以后呢，它可以帮助我们，然后能够就是掌控我们与学员之间的对话。
If our learner has a strong reflector or theorist style, they will be most happy on this part of the model, of the red, the orange, and the yellow. They will be most happy there. And they will want to talk about it, think about it, look at different options, etc., etc. They will be most comfortable in the red, orange, and yellow bit of the cycle of the conversation.
如果你的学员他是一个比较偏向反思者或者理论者的话，他可能会就是在这个图上面的红色、橙色、黄色部分，他比较喜欢就是可能比较喜欢待在这个部分，因为在这个部分呢，可以帮助他去探索一些不同的选项。
Which means it can be quite a challenge to get them to move forward to looking at new actions and then making a decision about what they're going to do. It can be quite challenging.
这个时候呢，作为导师，你面临的难题就是能够让他去到这个左边蓝色、绿色的部分，就是能够让他去采取下一步的行动。
Equally, if your learner has a strong activist pragmatist learning style, they might want to get to this bit of the conversation too quickly.
然后你的就是同龄的学员，他如果是活动者这种风格的，他可能就比较愿意待在这边左边一块，他可能比较愿意进行左边这一个区域的对话。
So we have to help them to consider all the things that they need to think about before they actually say, yes, I can do that. Yes, that'll do. I'll do it that way. Those kind of responses.
那这个时候主要是就是要帮他们去思考，你在做行动之前，然后思考一下是否就是所有的该涉及到的地方是不是都考虑周到了。
In my training programs, I have an exercise that helps the coach mentor manage this process by having an exercise around asking questions. Sometimes, if your learner is too much focused on the red and orange and yellow bits, you need to ask questions to help them move forward. So a question like, what else could you think about? What else could you do? Helping them move forward is very useful.
那我在做导师那个过程当中呢，我会我自己有很多的练习，然后帮助就是导师我会有很多的练习，然后提供给导师教练，然后帮助他们在对话过程当中，就是面对学员有不同风格倾向的时候，可以用怎样的对话。比如说这个学习者他是比较倾向于就是红、橙、黄这一块的话，那你作为导师或教练，你主要是要帮助他 进一步的去采取行动。你可以问，就是你还有其他什么想到的吗？你还有什么能做的吗？然后这样呢，然后去促使他，然后采取下一步的行动。
But if they are strong activist pragmatists and they are moving too quickly through the blue and green phases, there are other questions like, is there anything else we need to consider? What might go wrong? Etc., etc. The kind of questions which actually act almost as a brake on the process and makes them consider the whole issue.
如果你的学员他是一种就偏向实用主义的话，那么你可以也是通过一些问题就问他，比如说你还有什么你能够想到的吗？就你可能这中间可能会出现什么问题，就是你能够就是让他及时刹车，然后做好足够的一些思考，然后再去行动。
And one little note of warning, if you are a strong reflector theorist and you are mentoring a strong reflector theorist, you must remember the aim of each session is to get to a point of making a decision, of your learner making a decision. You can have wonderful conversations. You can develop deep respect for one another, but you might never get anything done.
有一个小的提醒，就如果你的学员他是就是比如说是他是理论风格的，或者说是反思者的，那这个时候你们的辅导对话主要的目标应该是帮助他做决定。
So the last point about this model, dialogi, is that the gray semicircle on the outside indicates that is our role as the mentor. We are there to manage and guide the conversation.
这个就是在这张图呢，因为下面这样还有一个半圆，就是提醒我们作为导师，我们导师呢是能够引导这样对话的。
Yeah. The colored slices refer to our learner's agenda, what our learner is working towards achieving, and we are there on the outside to support that process.
这个彩色部分呢，主要也是跟学员相关的，是学员的他的一个学习过程，然后在这个过程当中呢，然后帮助他实现他的就是目标，然后我们呢是一个可能比较在外旁观者的角色，然后来支持这个过程。
Well, my friends, that is at the end of the webinar. I've got a couple more things to share with you, but does anyone have any questions? Does everyone understand what we've been doing and hopefully finding it useful? Any questions?
然后现在大家就是对之前讲的内容有没有什么提问的？就是有没有什么还想问的？可以现在提问。
Can I have a question? I think I just get a vague understanding of it because I cannot remember all of them in one time. So I wonder if I can buy something like a book or like a file or for me to read afterwards. Yeah, to study, to remember, and then practice. Yeah.
That's a lovely question, Craig. Thank you. IC has, I think I did send it to you, IC. If not, I will resend it. The Honey and Mumford exercise, but it's got a lot of explanatory information in it as well. And I think you would find that very useful. I'm also going to continue looking through Pearson Publishing. You know, they're worldwide, and I'm almost certain it must be available in Chinese, but I will try to find out, and I will let IC and Fisher know. Okay, Michelle, you had a question.
就是 针对刚才就是那个他的
Michelle. Hi. I didn't hear your question. Sorry.
Michelle, you mute.
Ah, you're mute.
Michelle, you mute?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I didn't have any questions so far. Thank you.
Oh no, I thought the other Michelle.
Yeah,
Okay,
Michelle, you mute?
Thanks.
My question is, I would like to know from a research perspective, does learning style or the individual has a dominant learning style? And somehow people with the maturity, they will switch back and forth. But sometimes I feel, or say, at least observe myself, my dominant style will impact the coaching or mentoring session.
Right. Well, I think the best way I can respond, Michelle, is to say that is to reiterate that it is not like a Myers-Briggs psychometric test. In other words, it is not about hardwiring. I see. Do you want to?
刚才他的那个 Michelle 的问题就是关于这个学习风格这一块有没有就是主导型的？因为有的人在职场中比较成熟，他可能偏向于主导这种风格，然后这种风格也会影响你的导师的教练的这个实践。然后Jen 的回答是就是在刚才这个工具呢，它主要不是就是针对心理测量领域的，它主要是不是针对就是人的就是心理方面的内容。
Thank you. It's about, it's also very much, in my experience, and this is a practical example I can give, Michelle, very much influenced by context. I see.
然后从我的就是角度来讲，我的经历来讲，就是这个工具呢，它更讲究实用性，然后它更多的是跟那个语境情境相关的。
Yeah. Some years ago, I was involved in a program in which the participants were academic professionals, academics, but they were all political asylum seekers, and they had arrived in London, mostly from North Africa.
然后我自己在就是很多年前，然后也做过一个项目，然后这个项目的参与者呢，他们主要是也是学术方面、学术领域的人。然后这里呢，主要当时的事情是，就是当时北非有很多的就是人来到伦敦，然后寻求政治庇护。
I assumed that as they'd been political activists, their activist learning style would be very high because of, what had happened to them. So they'd have a high activist learning style score. That was my assumption.
然后这些人呢，因为他们可能是本身就比较偏向学术的，然后本身对就是学习呢也是比较热情的，然后这些人呢就是主要就是在活动这个风格就有很强的倾向。
In fact, the opposite was the case. Their activist score was very low. Their reflector score was very high. Their theorist score was very high. And their pragmatist score was very low. Had low, high, high, low.
比较就是相反的例子的人呢，这种人就是在活动者这个倾向以及实用主义者这个倾向的分数就非常的低，然后在反思跟理论这方面的分数就比较高。
When we explored the reasons for this, and this was almost a uniform profile, and we did 3 iterations of this course, so 3 different groups. The learning style profile was almost identical for each individual.
然后就是为了探索其中的原因呢，我们也做了一个比较统一的一个方案，然后针对这个是不同的组织，然后我们试着就是从 比较一个相同的一个就是学习风格方案中，我们来就是研究。
The activist score was low because they were forced almost into a state of inactivity. Their reflector score was very high because they had so much time to sit and reflect on what had happened to them. The Theorist score was quite high because they were professional academics and had academic learning experiences. But the saddest part of all was their Pragmatist score was virtually nil because their lives were on hold since and I'm Australian, so I can make this remark, the British government was taking forever to give them indefinite leave to remain in the United Kingdom. So they were not able to plan anything. They were not able to look ahead and implement their new lives.
然后之所以他们那个活动者分数比较低呢，是因为就他们可能有一种就是好像本身就这种意愿不是很强，有一种强迫式的意味在里面。然后在他们就是做第二个反思者这块分数比较高，是因为他们有足够的时间坐下来慢慢的思考。然后在理论方面分数比较高，是因为他们本身是专业的学术人士，然后有相应的就是学术学习背景，所以这一块分数比较高。然后实用主义者这块分数比较低，是因为就是他们可能就是人生不是很自由吧，因为他们是来寻求庇护的，然后他们无法就是也针对自己未来的下一步行动也没有办法去做计划去实施。
So that explains, Michelle, how context can have such an influence on the learning preference one uses. I describe learning styles for mentors and coaches as a kind of compass point. It's a compass which enables you to set the direction of your conversations, of your interventions, and in fact, your whole relationship with your learner.
就以我自己的经验的话，就是我们就这个工具，它是与就是所相关的情境，它就对方所处情境是息息相关的。然后你可以利用这个工具呢，去就很好的去掌控你们对话的方向，去如何介入。
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Jane. Jane, you're mute. Do you have a question? Oh, no. Sorry, I thought you were waving. Just Jane waving to Jane, was it? Okay, let's have the next slide, please. I'm a pragmatist, and I always like to end sessions with people identifying some actions that they might take, something they've found useful as a result of our time together today. So just spend just a minute to think about these questions.
这个是关于行动计划，因为我也是一个主张实用的人，所以我在每次可能做完讲座啊什么之后，我都会就是希望大家然后想一想，花时间想一想，你接下来要采取什么样的行动。
And these are the kind of questions that any coach mentor in the workplace might be asking their learner.
现在也是大家做导师教练的时候可以问到学员的一些问题。
If you've answered yes to the last question, oh yes, Kelly.
Hi, 我有一个问题，麻烦帮我翻译一下，谢谢。因为我不是那种谈话型的教练，我也是有一半是运动型的教练。因为刚才导师讲的他是通过问卷，我是在想有没有其他的方式，比如说观察或者是就是平时的那个聊天，这样的就是没有专门的那种问卷的形式呢？就是要了解我的那个对象。
风格。I'm a coach, but I'm not good at about the conversations, and I'm a sports coach. I wonder except the questionnaires, the LSQ tool, if there are other means for us to get to know the learning styles, the preferences, such as observation and daily conversations.
Yeah. That's a great question, Kelly. And I would respond in that for myself, I like to do learning styles fairly early on in the relationship, because that gives me clues. It gives me clues to what my learner is, how my learner is likely to respond to new challenges, whether they will be someone who'll say, oh, yes, I'll try that technique, without actually thinking about what other options were open to them. So that would tell me that this is a learner who's an activist, and maybe their learning will develop through having your guidance into helping them look at other options, look at other techniques, other methods which they might find useful. So for me, I call in learning style preferences is one of my key building blocks in a successful coach mentoring relationship. It's one of the must-haves for me to ensure that my relationship with my learner is going to be as effective for them as it possibly can be. It fills in a little blank.
然后我的回答就是我自己呢，因为也非常喜欢用这个工具，因为这个工具它其实也是给我一些线索，让我知道就是我的学员他能够就是知道就了解我们的学员他的学习风格偏好，如果同时呢也可以帮助他就是能够应对他新的挑战。就比如有的人他是那种活动型风格的，他就会愿意尝试新的事物，然后可能就是不考虑太多，然后就直接行动，就让我知道了这个学习的风格。然后我呢也是能够，然后学员的学习风格呢其实也是可以通过你作为导师教练的引导，然后可以引导他们可能有其他的一些方法，可能用其他的一些技术，对，有用的。然后这个风格呢也是就是这个学习风格偏好这个工具，它也是我自己在做导师辅导过程当中就是运用的几个基础模块的其中一个。对我来说这个是非常有效的，也是在弥补一点空缺。
Thank you. I see. Is that helpful, Kelly? Is that helpful?
这个答案
有一些，但是可能还是需要消化一下。谢谢。
Okay, let's come back. Do you see the last bullet point? Is anyone answering yes to that? Do you want to develop your mentoring skills?
看最后一个问题就是你们的答案是否是想提升你的导师辅导技能吗？
Because if you've answered yes, we can go to the next slide and share with you that in August, I'm going to be running a 2-day workshop on the essentials of effective mentoring in the workplace.
如果大家想提高自己的导师辅导技能的话，那我在8月份的时候呢，会举办一场为期2天的工作坊，然后主要也是关于在职场导师辅导的一些要领。
And day one will, and I've just talked to Kelly about the 7 building blocks, day one will cover the 7 building blocks of effective workplace mentoring and coaching.
第一天呢，主要是关于高效导师辅导的7个关键模块。
And you can see the program for day one there.
大家可以看这里就是第一天，然后涵盖的内容。
Is that everyone happy with that? Does that look like an interesting menu?
大家是否觉得非常感兴趣？
Yes.
And then day 2, thanks, Fisher, we work on the practical, the 5 key skills that you need to be excellent at deploying if you're going to be the kind of mentor you really want to be.
然后第2天呢，主要是跟大家讲解关于非常实用的导师辅导里的5项技能。
And Fisher and IC have added the information you need if you're going to register for this workshop. And for me, it's one of the wonders of technology that here am I in West Wales thinking about having 2 days with you in China in August. So thank goodness for Zoom.
右边呢是报名信息，大家如果感兴趣的话，可以扫这个2维码，或者是联系我们的课程顾问。这里是他的手机号，微信也是这一个号。然后就感谢 Zoom， 因为我在威尔士，然后能够就是通过工作坊跟大家在中国的你们，然后建立起联系。
And before I show you the last slide, I just want to share with you a book I've found, Mentoring, the Tao of Giving and Receiving Wisdom. I found this book. I've had it for a long time, but I just rediscovered it. So before August, I will be using this in the preparation of our workshop together. Do you know it, Fisher? Do you know this book?
No. Actually, it's my first time to know this one.
Chung Liang, Al Huang, and Jerry Lynch. It's an American and a Chinese.
Okay. Okay. Oh.
But 这本书的呢也是关于导师辅导的书，然后我
It's beautiful.
在准备这个工作坊的时候呢，我会用到这本书。
Where can we buy it?
I don't know. I'll send you the details. It's published by HarperCollins, but I think it's quite old.
Yeah, maybe Jane, after you just send us the link of the book, and then we will try to see whether we can get it from Amazon. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah.
There we are. So last slide, please, Fisher.
Yeah.
So I thought I would say thank you for listening and show a picture of the countryside where I live in West Wales. And maybe one day it will inspire you to come and visit us in Wales.
最后呢，非常感谢大家的聆听。这张图呢，也是我住的地方，在威尔士的一个乡村。然后想大家可能有一天有感兴趣，会来这里看一看。
We'll try to visit you, Jane.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. I hope you found it interesting and helpful, and I look forward, if possible, to seeing you again in August. I've really enjoyed this morning, and thank you for your interest in the session.
Thank you.
今天的讲座呢，给大家帮助，然后也让大家感到非常有趣。我也期待8月份与大家的再次相见。